This is not going to go the way you think. This piece of dialogue, perfectly made for a trailer, was delivered by Mark Hamill in his grand return as Jedi Master Luke Skywalker in the 8th chapter of the mainline series of Star Wars films. That's right, I'm talking about Star Wars The Last Jedi. Hotly anticipated and sure to divide the fanbase, is the Force strong with this film? Find out in my review. Oh, and big spoiler warning, so warned you I have. So here we are, I've had time to process things. It's been about 24 hours since I have seen Star Wars The Last Jedi. A movie which honestly still confounds me, and like a lot of the characters in the series, I feel conflicted. I'm not really sure if I love or hate this film. It's somewhere in between. I do believe that Star Wars The Last Jedi is a flawed film. It's got a lot of pacing issues and some characters and subplots that frankly, I just don't care about. Not to mention, a lot of big plot threads which were brought up in The Force Awakens are completely erased after a lot of major events in this movie right here. So without further ado, let's go ahead and talk about Star Wars The Last Jedi. If you're watching this review, chances are you've probably already seen the film, so I'm going to spare you the actual plot of Star Wars The Last Jedi, which is actually divided into 3 very distinctive parts, with the Resistance running away from the First Order, Finn and his brand new gal pal Rose going to the casino city of Canto Bight, and Rey, who is training with Jedi Master Luke Skywalker, if you even want to call it training. All of these stories eventually intersect at the very end, leading to a very awesome finale, I do have to admit. But really, that's about it. And even though there are a lot of different things which are going on at once, I have to say, this was kind of a slog of a Star Wars movie. Mostly for the beginning and the second half of the film. Once we started to get more towards the climax, it really picked up. And even with that said, there are still so many great visuals in this movie that it's still hard to find yourself actually bored with the final product here. But really, this one is going to be defined by all of the big controversial things which are going on in the story. So without further ado, let's just talk about all of the juicy bits, and let's sort of break it down by character. So let's go ahead and start with Luke frickin' Skywalker. This was like a childhood dream come true. I was about to sit down in a movie theater and see Luke Skywalker return. This was a big moment for me, as of course I was born in the late 80s. I never had an opportunity to see the original Star Wars films when they were released, with the whole not being born thing. But in the mid-90s, 1997 to be exact, I did have the opportunity to see the special edition of the films, and it was awesome. But being able to finally see a continuation of that story in a big theater at a midnight release with a ton of super excited fans was honestly a great experience. The crowd I was with made it really great, and as soon as Luke appeared on screen, everybody freaked out. And I think that Mark Hamill is definitely the standout of this film. He did a fantastic job with everything that's been given to him. And this is a very different Luke Skywalker than the one that we saw from the original classic trilogy. Basically, Luke has become the next generation Yoda. He has transformed into this old, cranky, kind of goofy hermit who lives on this beautiful island surrounded by weird, freaky, pudgy aliens that look over the old Jedi grounds, and of course, the super infamous Porgs. But Luke in this movie, like I said, is very similar to Yoda. Before, he was this revered hero who became this mythological person who created the brand new Jedi Order. When it was suddenly swept away, he went into exile, and here he is at the planet of Acto. And this also happens to be the place where there is this Jedi temple which holds actual books. There are books with pages in Star Wars here. It's not a hologram. It's not some weird freaking disc that you slip into a computer or the panel on a ship. It's an actual book, and that's actually kind of unique for the series, and it holds all the secrets of the Jedi and what it means to be a Jedi and train. It sounds really boring, and I think Yoda puts it best himself. It's not much of a page-turner. Yes, Yoda is in this movie, we'll get to that in a second, but really the entire thing with Luke Skywalker in this movie is that he's reluctant to become a Jedi again or to teach any more future Jedi because of the mistakes he made in the past with his new order, which unfortunately we don't get to see too much of. There's a small scene where we get to see Kylo Ren and the destruction and the fire and the scene where he's standing next to R2, but they elaborated on it a little bit more, but we don't actually get to see any of the order or him training any of the students or the younglings, whatever they want to call them at this point in the series, and I kind of wish we could have seen something like that, but they managed to sort of trim the fat on a lot of big details in this movie for the sake of just giving us a lot of just raw entertainment, and in some ways I kind of wanted a little bit more backstory, especially because a lot of crazy things have happened since we saw Luke Skywalker, but what is clear is that he wants nothing to do with the Jedi Order anymore. He feels that everything that he did with Ben Solo, turning him to the dark side accidentally, it was the worst thing that could have happened. He was too ashamed to face Han and Leia, so he put himself in exile. And when Rey finally comes to him, it leads to what I think might be my favorite scene of the entire movie, because what I love is that we've been waiting like 2.5 freaking years to see what's going to happen between this interaction between Luke and Rey. And what does Luke do immediately? He just takes the freaking lightsaber and just throws it over his shoulder right over the cliffside. We've been waiting all this time, and they just open with a joke. It was really unexpected, and I liked it. And then you see Rey, who constantly follows Luke, going about his day, who tries to ignore her with everything that he has. And this is also really funny, just getting to see how far he's actually going as a hermit, doing elaborate things like catching massive fish, and quite literally extracting blue milk from the teat of some sort of giant alien on the planet, which seems to have zero problem with just being casually milked by anyone which walks up to it. And the scene of him putting it in the bottle and then drinking it with it like dripping all over his face and everything just made him seem like this crazy Jedi hobo, and it was hilarious to me. Eventually, however, Luke realizes that there's a little bit more to Rey than meets the eye. He realizes that there is some sort of strong presence within her, something that is allowing her to use the Force in such an extreme and destructive way. And in many ways, this frightens him because he's afraid that maybe he could potentially create another Ben Solo in this situation. It's really freaking crazy. So throughout the entire film, Luke is trying not to teach her, but eventually he does give in, and that leads to a lot of really great scenes, and also something that I think is going to be divisive amongst Star Wars fans, as the way that Luke actually trains Rey is unlike any sort of training that we've actually seen in Star Wars thus far. It's a little more philosophical. It's not so much physical training. It's not like when, you know, Luke was with Yoda on Dagobah and doing backflips and stuff, you know. He's not hanging on the back of Rey or doing anything like that. He's really just teaching her all of the philosophies of the Jedi itself, and also trying to get her to understand what the Force actually is. And thankfully, they don't get into the whole midi-chlorian thing. They keep it a little more mystical here, which I definitely love. It always makes the Star Wars series seem just as much fantasy as it does sci-fi, an element that I really do love that they played up quite a bit in this movie. And there's this whole sequence, too, that's very similar to Empire Strikes Back, where Luke goes into the tree, where Rey goes into this like dark chasm, and she confronts her inner self, and she's about to be revealed like who her parents actually are, which is another big subplot of the movie. And then nothing happens. She's just presented with herself. She goes back out, and just like Luke, she learns a lesson the hard way. It's a really intense scene, and it's a great callback to the originals. But for the most part, Luke does not really do much in the movie, to be honest. He just sort of stands around and looks really cool, and occasionally has some pretty fantastic and chills-inducing dialogue. But there is a point in the film where both Rey and Luke do have a little bit of confrontation with one another, when Rey realizes that maybe Luke was not telling a lot of the big details about what happened with the Jedi Order, and how he actually considered killing his nephew, Ben Solo. And this leads to this scene where we get to learn that basically Luke felt this very dark presence within Ben Solo, and he realized that if he didn't do anything, something really bad was going to happen. And for a second, he had these doubts and actually pulled out his classic green lightsaber. And this is a really big moment for Luke. And I really like it, too, because it truly humanizes him and makes him so much different than the freaking Jedi that we saw from the prequel trilogy, which seemed like they were all so flawless. Luke is a character that has a ton of flaws, and that makes him a lot more relatable here. We get to see him at one of his greatest weaknesses here, where he actually thinks he could just kill this guy right here, but before he can bring himself back and reignite the lightsaber, Ben wakes up, sees his uncle standing over him with a lightsaber, and feels that he's about to be attacked, so he pulls out his lightsaber, a big confrontation begins, the walls come down with the power of the Force, and this was the birth of Kylo Ren. I'm hoping we'll get more detail of that in the future film, maybe some more of the Knights of Ren, who were not even in this movie at all, but still, this whole sequence was really great. And it's at this point of the film that Rey decides to meet up with the other Resistance so that they can stop the First Order from destroying them, and Luke reluctantly stays on Acto. That is until the final act of the movie, which is just such an epic Luke Skywalker moment, and it's also so out there and different than anything that's been seen in Star Wars. This is a moment that I think people are going to be debating for years for how just ridiculous and over the top it is. So Luke Skywalker basically goes to the final planet at the end of the film, which I believe is called Crate, and he decides to have a one-on-one confrontation with Kylo Ren. They're right there in the middle of this like giant salt field. You got freaking First Order walkers over here, the Resistance over here, which has almost been completely defeated, and you have these two awesome Jedi standing in this place, and it just looks so freaking awesome. Just the tension here was fantastic. And then they have this short little lightsaber battle, and what's really great here is they do a great job of like hiding the fact that this is not actually Luke who is here. He is using the Force to create a projected hologram of himself. And this is insane. And there are so many little subtle clues to this when you actually watch the movie. If you'll notice, when Luke is actually walking through these sands, he's not leaving any like marks from his steps, and you know this because on this planet, whenever you like move across the sand or something gets blown away, it leaves a red trail of dust, and you don't see that when Luke is actually moving around, which is really freaking clever and awesome. I really loved that part of the movie, and it's a great clue to let you know that things are not quite what they seem. They even have all of the walkers like shoot at him at the same time, and at that moment you don't realize he's a hologram, and it just makes him seem so legendary. And basically he's just here to let him know that the Jedi are never going to end. There are other people like Rey out there who have the ability to use the Force. And in that moment, his hologram disappears. He already had his reunited sequence with Leia, which was awesome, by the way, and really hit me right here, especially because they made him look a little younger and everything, like he was sort of like dressing up for the occasion, but really that's just the projection he created. And as soon as the hologram of himself disappears, we see him on Acto, who's at this cliffside and in this like cross-leg pose, concentrating on the Force, and then suddenly he falls over, comes to peace with himself, looks up in the sky, which has two twin suns, and then suddenly he disappears. Just like Obi-Wan Kenobi, just like Yoda, Luke Skywalker has become one with the Force and dies. Luke dies in this movie, and holy crap, this was something I was not prepared for. I honestly thought that Luke was going to be staying around at least for the next entry of the series. But no, Rian Johnson killed Luke Skywalker, and I'm still conflicted by it. Conflicted because I wanted more. I wanted more Luke. I wanted to see him in action. I wanted to see why he is revered as legend. I wanted to see a scene with him fighting like against 100 stormtroopers at once and just completely owning all of them. I thought at the end of the film when he was confronted by the walkers, he was going to go all Force Unleashed on these guys and just start like picking them up and throwing them around and deflecting the blasts and everything. That would have been insane. But instead, Luke Skywalker did it what he always does. He always incorporates trickery into his missions, and it worked here. And he really brought back a lot of that classic Luke Skywalker bravado. Like I said, he is kind of like this old cranky hermit, but there are these little moments where his old personality comes out, like when he's training Rey, like for the first time with the Force. He takes like a leaf and dangles it in front of her face and her hands, and he's like, "Can you feel the Force? Can you feel it?" And she's like, "Yeah, yeah," and then he just like smacks her in the back of the head. It's a really funny sort of classic moment that reminds me of like the old martial arts master teaching his student. It's really fantastic. That, and just like I said, there are little moments like when he's going up against Kylo, or after he's been blasted like by all those shots and it's just a hologram, like he like wipes off his sleeves a little bit, gives a little smirk. There's still a little bit of Luke Skywalker in there, which I really loved, but it did feel like a natural progression of all of the crazy things that he went through. It's just, I wanted more. I'm not gonna lie, I just wanted more Luke Skywalker. Still, I did love everything about him in this movie. He definitely carried it, and the death of Luke Skywalker is still an epic moment for the series, and it's just surreal to actually like see another movie with Luke Skywalker in it, and it was great seeing Mark Hamill come back. He acted his ass off in this movie and did a fantastic job, and you know, I hope we'll get to see him as a Force ghost in the next entry of the series. I mean, I think it's going to happen right before he went away with his hologram. He even told Kylo Ren, you know, if you strike me down, very similar to the Obi-Wan line, he's like, I'll be able to follow you till death. I'll be with you all the time. So he's going to be basically haunting him as a Force ghost, which I think is going to be great. You know, him and Yoda could get in on it. Hell, bring in all the other Jedi. Just, you know, that would be a really cool thing to actually see in the next entry of the series. But I'm getting ahead of myself. There's still so much more to talk about in this movie. I only just talked about Luke Skywalker. Let's talk about Rey, the main heroine of the movie. Rey in this movie is basically Rey from the first movie. I mean, she gets a little bit of training from Luke Skywalker, but she does become significantly more competent in this film, especially with using a lightsaber and everything. But really, her entire journey revolves around the fact that she wants to learn her purpose and who her parents are, something that people have been debating for years at this point. And we might have gotten our first clues, and we might even have gotten our answer in this movie as to who Rey's parents are. And according to Kylo Ren, they're just random nobodies who sold her and abandoned her on the planet of Jakku and never looked back. This is really interesting and unexpected because I think Rian Johnson is sort of playing with the emotions of the fans a little bit, but also sort of like striking back against the just ridiculous overhype and fandom that these people come up with all these crazy theories. Like, is it Obi-Wan's granddaughter? Is she a Skywalker or something? No, she's just a chick who's really powerful with the Force, and she's one of the people in this galaxy who are now starting to become Force sensitive. This is The Awakening. That's why the last movie was called The Force Awakens. This is simply a ripple effect which is happening, and Rey might have been at the actual center of all of it, which might make her a pretty important figure in terms of the Jedi lore, but that remains to be seen, as it looks like history is about to be completely rewritten with everything that's going on with Rey. But her entire journey throughout the movie is really good as she grows a little stronger, more confident, and even has a lot of really great standout scenes, especially her confrontation with Snoke. We'll get to Snoke in a second. Holy freaking crap. She still has some pretty big flaws, and you get to see them when she is confronted by Snoke in this film, and the fact that she still doesn't seem to have full control over her abilities and knowing whether she wants to go to the light or the dark side of the Force. You know, she's still kind of a blank slate, though. There's still a lot more they can do with Rey as the series is going to go on, and it's sort of insinuated by the end of the film that she's sort of going to be like the beginning of the next Jedi Order that could possibly happen. But really, like I said, Rey to me was sort of more of a background character in this movie, despite the fact that she was front and center quite a bit. Maybe it's just my fanboyism of just seeing Luke Skywalker again. Like, I just loved it. But I will say the best thing about Rey in this movie, the best thing, has got to be her interactions with Kylo Ren. As throughout the entire film, her and Kylo are connected. They're bridged together through the Force. And even when they're on completely different planets, they're able to communicate with each other through the Force, and they can even physically interact with each other if they concentrate enough. This leads to some really awesome scenes in the film, and also some surprisingly funny moments as well, like when Kylo is talking to her and he apparently just got done taking a shower and doesn't have his shirt on. She even comments that he needs to put the damn shirt on. It's really funny, but I love it because you're always waiting for them to start interacting with each other, because it can happen at any time, and it was a really great part of the film that I really loved, and unlike anything that we've seen in the other Star Wars movies. That's not to say that we haven't seen characters communicating with each other through the Force, but for them to physically transcend it and actually interact physically with one another is unlike anything that we have seen from the franchise, and we could see something even more like this evolve in the next entry of the series, which I really can't wait to see what they're going to do with that. It's going to push things even freaking further. So there it is. Those are basically the two main characters of the movie, but what about the side characters of the series? Well, there are a lot of them here, so let's just jump right through this. First, Finn. Finn is great in this movie. I love Finn. He's such a funny and hilarious character. He's funny without being, like, forceful about it. Like, he's not, like, cringy like Jar Jar Binks. He is a genuinely funny character, but he also has a lot of fantastic moments in this movie right here. More so the final part. Like, there's this whole big sequence where the entire Resistance is about to be destroyed by this giant battering ram weapon, and they have to take it out, and the ships can't get close enough, and Finn is the only one who can do it, and it looks like he's about to go through this, like, big suicide run. In this moment, like, I was gripping my seat. I was like, oh my god, are they really gonna kill Finn this way? Oh my god, oh my god, oh my god, and then boom! This new character comes in, and her name is Rose, and I don't like Rose that much. Rose just, I mean, I don't know, it's hard to articulate, like, why I didn't really like her character all that much. Really, it's just because I found her story to be kind of underwhelming and boring. She's just another random member of the Resistance who had an older sister who was a fighter pilot for them, and she dies at the beginning of the movie in this big epic bombing scene, and basically she's just trying to help out Finn so that they can find out how to stop all of these Star Destroyers from catching up with them and constantly tracking them, because they can track them through the freaking light speed. Yes, they can do that in this movie, and I don't know, just like, she just feels kind of tacked on. Like, she's sort of like this, like, forced love interest for Finn. And I say that because at the end of the film, she does kiss him, which, you know, even freaking Finn and Rey didn't kiss, and their relationship feels way more genuine and, like, actually has chemistry to it. We saw that in The Force Awakens, and unfortunately we don't get too much from them in this movie aside from a big hug at the very end of the movie. But, like, the chemistry between Rose and Finn just, I didn't really feel it. And the overall adventure that they go on, which their mission is to go to Canto Bight, this big casino city, is fun initially, because they're like, oh, it's a wacky Star Wars place with all types of crazy aliens. These guys are going to become memes in no time. But then it starts to spend way too much time there. There's this whole stupid message about animal cruelty, where they save all of these racing animals, and it leads to this sequence which feels like something out of the Star Wars prequels. Did George Lucas direct this sequence? Like, I don't know. I did not care about all of this. And the whole point of even going to this place is that they're trying to meet this guy who can actually help them from stopping the trackers and the Death Stars and all that other stuff. And they end up just meeting this dude who's played by Benicio del Toro. I didn't even know he was going to be in this movie. So it was a pleasant surprise in seeing him. He plays a character named DJ, who basically just is there to kind of subtly be their friend, be a villain, be their friend, and then be a villain again. It's kind of weird. He just sort of plays to his very own whims. Whatever can basically get him the most money. It's weird, too, because at first they make him come across as a jerk, then they make him likable, then they make him a villain again. What I will say is he's barely in the movie at all, and really doesn't even have that much dialogue. He mostly is just Benicio del Toro just sort of chewing the scenery with his crazy faces and everything, and I did like that and everything, but maybe we'll get to see more of him in the future. And basically by the end of the movie, he ends up just turning Rose and Finn over to the First Order. They get captured and they're about to be executed, and cue from the left side of the screen, freaking Captain Phasma. That's right, Captain Phasma returns in this movie, and I'm pissed about this, because they promised more Captain Phasma, and we basically got about the same amount in this movie, maybe even less. And she's still basically just the same. She's super pissed off at frickin' Finn, and she wants him executed. And during this big scene where the entire ship is being destroyed, you have Finn versus Phasma, which is something that I was really looking forward to seeing, especially after seeing it in the trailers. But it happened so fast, and there was very little build-up to it, that it came across as slightly underwhelming. That being said, the entire image of them fighting is awesome. I think it looks really freaking great. The overall visuals here are great. BB-8 takes control of a giant freaking walker. That's really awesome. R2-D2 never did anything like that. They make BB-8 really useful in this movie. But the battle between Phasma and Finn, I mean, it was cool, but it was just over so quickly, and Phasma, of course, is defeated. He ends up smacking her right in the face, and you get to see a chunk of her helmet has actually been broken, and you can see her eye underneath. They still don't fully reveal her, and then she just falls into this, like, big pit of fire, and she might be dead. My theory is Phasma's coming back. She survived the trash compactor. She's going to survive the fire. Hell, she even took a blaster shot to the chest and it deflected right off of her chrome armor. She can survive a little bit of fire. She's going to get out of there and hopefully we will see her return and maybe we'll get more of an actual backstory and some more interesting things from this character. I cannot wait to see. But yeah, the whole Finn Rose thing, it just doesn't work for me. And again, the scene with Finn where he's about to crash into the giant battering ram, like, I didn't want Finn to die, but if he died during that sequence, that entire moment would have been way more effective and it would have been one of the perfect ways to end his character arc. It would have shown that he's fully dedicated to the cause of the Resistance as a former stormtrooper and giving his life to stop this massive weapon. The power of love stopped that. The power of forceful stalker tasing you in the face love. Her name is Rose. Maybe she'll get better in the next movie. That being said, I am glad to still see Finn return, as I think he's a fantastic character. He's really fun to watch, and I can't wait to see more of his growth in the next part of the series. One character that I think got some of the best moments of this movie have to be Poe freaking Dameron. Poe Dameron was so much more fun to watch in this movie, especially because he got so much more screen time. That and the fact that he basically staged a coup against the Resistance in this movie. There's this whole subplot with him butting heads with this brand new admiral by the name of Admiral Holdo, who is played by Laura Dern of Jurassic Park fame, and basically Poe is not happy with the things that she is doing. And he goes against her orders constantly, and he's the one who actually instructs Finn and Rose to go on this crazy mission. They even get the information from Maz Kanata, which is sort of a throwaway cameo, and that's the last we see of her in the movie, which is kind of disappointing, to be perfectly honest. But other than that, like, Poe Dameron in this movie, he's the one who sort of opens up the first action sequence of the film. He also delivers a lot of really great humorous lines, but his X-Wing skills still pay the bills, man. That opening scene was great. Just, they do some things I haven't seen. I love how they're able to do these, like, big, tight, like, weird drift-like turns with their ships in space, which makes no sense, but it looks freaking awesome. He's even got basically NOS on his X-Wing, too. It's insane. It's really great. But throughout the entire movie, he has a lot of doubts about the abilities of the Resistance and the actual mission that they're going on, which basically amounts to simply just running away, and that's why he decides to not only start a mutiny, which ultimately does fail with him simply just returning back to the Resistance anyway, but his plan with Finn and Rose doesn't really go anywhere, to be perfectly honest. And if Holdo would have just told him what the initial plan was, instead of freaking berating him like a puppy who just pissed on the freaking carpet, then maybe a lot of this stuff could have been avoided. Most of the Resistance is taken out in this movie. Just bam, bam, bam. Some of them off-screen, some of which piss me off. Admiral Akbar dies in this movie. We don't even get to see it. They just mention it in passing. That was not cool. I did not appreciate that as a hardcore Star Wars fan. Like I said, though, this movie is breaking convention with a lot of the things that it's doing. Admiral Holdo, let me just mention one moment with her, which has got to be one of the coolest parts of the movie, I have to admit. There is a sequence where all of the Resistance is finally running away, and we get Admiral Holdo, who is deciding to stay on the ship and go down with it like an old school captain, even though there's probably an escape pod on board. Make a freaking droid pilot that thing. Why do you gotta have a human on board? It makes no sense. So she turns the ship around and pilots it at this like massive, giant First Order ship, which is called a Vanguard. It's like this just ridiculously giant ship, unlike anything we've seen in the series, like even more than the Super Star Destroyer and even the one that Darth Vader was on. It is massive, and she goes into light speed and rams into it. And this sequence was great because you get to see it explode and split off into multiple directions, which causes untold destruction. And all of the sound during this sequence was completely muted, and it just made this such an atmospheric and awesome moment. It was definitely one of the coolest things from the movie. As far as the other Resistance members, I gotta talk about Leia in this movie, which unfortunately she's kind of in the sick bay for most of the film, and aside from that, she just sort of stands around and looks concerned, which is kind of a shame, but honestly, it is sort of a good final performance from Carrie Fisher. I do appreciate that. And there's also a big moment with Leia, which I'm not going to lie, I didn't like it. So I thought they were going to kill off Leia in this movie, and they almost make it seem like that's exactly what's going to happen. There's a scene with Kylo Ren and a couple of the other guys in TIE fighters, and they're targeting the bridge of her ship, and they're going to blow it away with missiles. Kylo's about to do it, but he doesn't. But the guys next to him fire their missiles right into it. It explodes right there. She flies into the vacuum of space, and at that moment, I was like, holy crap, not only did they just kill Leia, they just killed Leia in one of the most violent, over-the-top fashions in the series. And then they go to the scene where she's hanging out in space, just floating around, freezing to death, and should already be dead, to be perfectly honest. She wakes up, she taps into the inner power of the Force, becomes Mary Poppins, and floats back down to the ship. I didn't like this moment. I didn't think that it looked very good, and it's just out of nowhere to see Leia use Force powers like this. It's implied that she has some sort of Force-sensitive abilities that we've seen in the previous films, with being able to communicate with Luke and find him on Cloud City, and realizing that she is the sister of Luke Skywalker. But here it's just like, whoa, this chick can freaking fly around in space and grab onto stuff, and it's just, it's insane. But it looked really weird. I'm not gonna lie. It looked so fake. Like, to me, it was probably the worst effect of the entire film, to be perfectly honest. I just did not care for it at all. But yeah, like I said, Leia's basically there just to kind of bark orders, and then she's sick for most of the movie. Then she comes back, brings Poe Dameron back into the fold, kind of like the super motherly person that she is. And by the end of the movie, she has one more final great scene where she interacts with Luke Skywalker, and she gets the gold dice from Han Solo's ship, which eventually goes to Kylo Ren and just sort of disappears there. Was that a hologram the entire time? I have no freaking idea. I will say that this was a good performance from Carrie Fisher, and I would have liked a little more Leia in the movie, to be honest. Just no more of the ridiculous floating around in space stuff. That just, no, did not do it for me. And then we have freaking Kylo Ren. Let's talk about the villains a little bit. Kylo Ren in this movie, I think, was way better than he was in the first, but only because he got a lot of really great development, and you really get to see this character just go insane and see how twisted he truly is. He has no remorse for the things that he has done, and he's mostly, like, just sort of biding his time throughout the first half of the film. There's a scene initially on where he's confronted by Supreme Leader Snoke, who asks him to remove that ridiculous, childish mask, and Force lightnings him, and gets really pissed, and he said he just wants nothing to do with him anymore, and he's going to have to reassess his training. Basically, it's tough love right here, and Kylo Ren destroys his freaking mask, which I hated because I love the look of that mask, and I think he looks really awesome in it, so you don't see it for the rest of the freaking movie. And then he has these conversations with Rey throughout the entire film, like I was saying earlier, and they're always really creepy, and it almost seems like by the end of the film, Rey has the ability to actually bring Kylo over to the light side of the Force, but that never actually happens, and that leads to what is going to be, next to Luke dying, one of the most controversial parts of this film. Supreme Leader Snoke gets killed by Kylo Ren. The character that people have been theorizing and speculating about for damn near 3 years gets killed in this movie about halfway through. It's done in a really cool way, though, when freaking Snoke is torturing Rey and Kylo is watching the entire time. Snoke actually has Luke Skywalker's lightsaber right next to him. It's sitting next to him, and Kylo just gets really mad as he's watching Rey get moved around the room with the power of the Force, and then he turns the lightsaber around right into his stomach, turns it on, and it completely cuts him in half, and he falls to the floor. That's it. Supreme Snoke apparently is no one special. Then why is he so freaking powerful with the Force? How did he create the First Order? How old is he? Is he human? Is he an alien? What's his deal? I feel slightly betrayed by the fact that they killed Snoke. That being said, I also love the fact that they made this incredibly bold decision to kill off this character that people have been hyping about. And it makes Kylo Ren seem all the more disturbing. And it also leads to what is one of the coolest action scenes of the movie, where we watch Rey and Kylo reluctantly team up in battle against Snoke's Praetorian guards, who all look awesome. Can't wait to see these guys at my next big convention. I know people are going to be cosplaying as them, and they look awesome. They made me want to see the Knights of Ren, which, like I said, I think they're saving them for the next entry of the series, but still, they look freaking awesome. The sequence where they're fighting against them too is really great because they have a lot of different variety of weapons, whether it be spears or swords, or even this like weird whip-like weapon, and they're all like electrified and have plasma imbued in them, which allows them to block all the lightsaber attacks. And the choreography and the overall look of this scene is definitely, I think, one of my favorite parts of this film. Snoke's throne room looks awesome with the red walls and the black and the gray. Everything just freaking pops at you, and it's just such a visually beautiful looking scene. That combined with just the chaos ensuing with that battle at the end was awesome. It was so freaking great. I absolutely loved it. So that's basically that. Supreme Snoke is no one special. They might elaborate on that in a book or a novel or an episode of Star Wars Rebels for all I know. All I know is I have to admit it's disappointing, but man, that scene was pretty cool. And who knows, Snoke might actually survive because he's not the first character in the series who's been cut in half. Darth Maul did return, and he got some pretty spiffy, awesome robot legs to boot. Maybe we could see the return of Snoke. Maybe this was a part of his plan from the beginning. Maybe he's gonna possess Kylo Ren. I mean, we've already seen Jedi holograms. How weird would that... I mean, it's not that weird. I mean, really, think about it. So, yeah, not gonna lie, that stuff is kind of disappointing. But that scene was still really freaking awesome. And just some other scenes I want to gush about because this review is going on for way too long. I want to talk about the return of Yoda. This scene was really great. This was like the moment I think I fanboyed the most in the entire theater because just like they used Muppet Yoda. They brought back the classic Muppet Yoda from Return of the Jedi, and it was the classic kind of goofy Yoda that I loved from that movie. And seeing him and Luke Skywalker talk after all these years was just, man, it was a childhood dream come true just to see more of this. And this was a great moment because Yoda basically told Luke that it's time to let this part of the Jedi Order go. It's time to let go of the past. The future is about to blossom something brand new for the Jedi. It might even be something new entirely, and not even Jedi or Sith. They could start getting into the gray stuff, which I think would be really awesome. I also just thought Yoda was really funny here, how he burnt down the Jedi Temple with lightning, which was hilarious, and him mentioning that the books themselves, the ancient Jedi text, they're not really page-turners. Just, that was a great moment. Yoda was awesome. I also just want to talk one more thing about like the visuals of the film. I loved the look of the final planet Crate. When I saw it initially, I was a little disappointed. I'm like, oh, this is basically Hoth. I thought it was actually an ice planet. But it's actually this like salt planet, and the ground is covered with this white salt, and whenever it's moved or touched, you see this red dust pop up. And man, you could tell they had a lot of fun doing this, because when the ships are flying across the surface, you see these giant ripples of red popping up, and when they start like going around each other and twisting around, and with the big explosions, visually speaking, it looks awesome. It's so good. I really do love it. Other than that, another sequence, just because, you know, I gotta mention a few more things. Chewbacca. I wish we'd have had more of him in this movie. He flies in the Falcon for pretty much the entire film. He's a great pilot, and he has a great moment towards the end, which is very reminiscent of Han coming in at the last second and saving the day. Really, he is the perfect companion for Rey as well. Rey, in many ways, is like a combination of Luke and Han Solo into one character, so I really love that. So that's why she's sort of like taken over the Millennium Falcon. And then, of course, there's the Porgs themselves. Chewbacca's relationship with the Porgs, I think, is really funny. One of my favorite scenes of the film is he's about to actually eat a Porg that he killed and caught, and he's surrounded by these other ones which are just watching him and staring at them with their giant freaking eyes, and the camera keeps getting closer to their faces, and it's like freaking Puss in Boots from Shrek 2. It is hilarious. And the Porgs themselves, I thought they were going to be way too intrusive in this movie. They were handled really well. I thought they were super adorable, and you know, I'm sure they're going to sell a lot of freaking Porg merchandise and all types of crap. To be perfectly honest, I've already been looking. I really do enjoy the Porgs quite a bit. But really, let's get to the core of it. Is The Last Jedi any good? I think it's a great movie. I think it's a flawed Star Wars movie. I don't know if I can necessarily attach a number to this movie quite yet. I need to think about it a little bit. But if I were to give it like a letter grade, it'd be like a B+. But like out of 5, it's... I don't know, it's hard to say. For me, maybe it's like a 3 or a 4. It's not a terrible movie. It's got some great visuals, but it's just got a lot of slow parts and some pacing issues. The Canto Bight sequence is really nothing all that special, and it just goes on for way too long. and I found myself not caring about the whole animal subplot where they were freeing them and everything. It just did not work for me. The only reason the Canto Bight sequence exists is so that we can have a really catchy ending that everyone's going to remember. This movie ends unlike any other Star Wars movie. We are introduced to some brand new characters, these kids on Canto Bight, these slave children who work for this big, ridiculous alien, and we see them earlier in the Canto Bight sequence in the middle of the movie. In the final scene of the film, we get to see this one kid who gets berated by his boss, and he goes back to work, and as he's walking outside, he picks up a broom, but he doesn't just simply pick it up. He pulls it to him with the power of the Force, and he almost does as if he's just doing this his entire life, or he doesn't even realize that he did it, and he looks up at the sky, he sees a falling star go across, and then he holds the broom almost like he's holding a lightsaber, and the movie ends. This is basically letting us know that there are more Force-sensitive people out there. There is a future for the Jedi, and it could be these random nobodies just like Rey. That's the really important part here, is that you don't have to be a Skywalker to be an awesome Jedi. You don't have to be some crazy super-powered alien. You can simply be anyone to use the Force, and that's going to bring about a brand new Jedi Order that we've never even considered seeing in the Star Wars series, which could be elaborated on in the next film, or maybe even the brand new trilogy that Rian Johnson is planning on doing. Maybe he was already sort of setting the groundworks for his own trilogy in this movie. Is that narcissistic? Maybe a little bit, but I'm willing to give it the benefit of the doubt. What I will say is, ultimately, despite the fact that some parts of this movie drag, and that most of it is just watching the Resistance run away, or the Resistance run away from the First Order, and we didn't get enough, I think, of Rey and Luke, I think it's still delivered on just the overall feel, the visuals, the epicness, everything that you want here. It's not my favorite Star Wars movie, but it's also not my least favorite Star Wars movie. It sort of falls somewhere in between. In fact, if we were just to rank them right now, my favorite movie, without a doubt, is still The Empire Strikes Back. Then, of course, there is The Force Awakens, there's the original Star Wars, A New Hope, there is also Return of the Jedi. That's right. And now we have The Last Jedi. I really did like The Last Jedi. It's definitely right there, smack dab in the middle, and then followed, of course, by Rogue One, Episode 3, Episode 1, and Episode 2. There it is. That's my thoughts on Star Wars The Last Jedi. You should definitely check it out if you are a Star Wars fan. It's worth seeing once, but be prepared. This series is going to rock you and shake your conventions of the entire series. Old fans might not like the new changes. New fans might be turned off for how ridiculous things are. What is worth saying is that Rian Johnson took a chance here, and I think that's a good thing. This is a different Star Wars movie, and people aren't going to be able to dog it for being like a complete recreation of the old things that we've seen from the past. But there are definitely a lot of callbacks to the classic movies, and even some scenes which seem like downright recreations of moments from Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. But ultimately, we have something different here. We have an ultra-tension-filled Star Wars movie and getting to see the birth of a brand new Jedi Order, which I think is going to be very fascinating. It could open up a lot of really great possibilities for the future of this franchise, which hopefully will not hit burnout with the amount of new films which are constantly releasing. This was a very long review, and I'm sure I missed so many details about The Last Jedi. There's still a lot more that I want to talk about, and maybe I'll do that in the future. What I will say is we are going to talk about this a little bit more in our podcast show, The Powerful Nerdcast. You guys should definitely check that out. In that episode, I'm going to have not just me, but Christian, our other friend Jordan on board, and maybe a few other people who are able to witness the movie with us, because we definitely want to give you guys a diverse opinion about this movie in the show, that everybody has different things to say, and most importantly, I want to hear from you guys. Make sure to tell me what you guys thought about Star Wars The Last Jedi. Have you had a chance to see the movie? Did you like it? Did you not like it? Did you have any favorite scenes or characters from the film? What are your hopes to see from the next big entry in the series? Tell me all your thoughts in the comments section below, and make sure to be respectful of your fellow commenters. We all have different opinions, so don't be a freaking douche. So there it is. That's my review of Star Wars The Last Jedi. I'll see you guys next time. Make sure to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and as always, may the Force be with you. Why would anyone wear their hoods like this? You can't see shit.